Thank you for listening to the Living Zen-podcast. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can take the next step in developing your own Zen practice, or how you can more formally connect with our community, please explore our online Orientation to Zen practice, which you can find on our website at zenwest.ca. If you enjoy the resources that we make available online, we would very much appreciate your support. There are a number of ways that you can help us continue to do the work we do. One of the best ways is by becoming a part of our community as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen-podcast, eZendo, and our online Orientation to Zen will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at zenwest.ca and click on Become an Associate. Many more Zen Talks are available for purchase on iTunes and at Amazon.com. Just search for Venerable Eshu Martin. These talks are also made available for free on our website for all of our members and associates. You may also want to download the Living Zen Podcast app, which makes downloading and listening to the podcast effortless. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening to Living Zen. The maintenance of nirvana. Well, see, I think one of the big problems is really trying to make it into the place, right? Like in Zen, there's Hakuin, one of the sutras that we chant every Sunday. He talks about like this. See, like I can't. It's like dancing songs. It's like just looking at standing on the edge of a swamp and wondering whether I should jump into that. Because the whole thing. Okay, so to talk about nirvana means I have to talk about what is meant by nirvana, and the word means like blowing out, extinction. And so in order to talk about what that means, I have to talk about what samsara is. And then I have to talk about what like the difference between sort of like Buddhist cosmology and sort of like Western cosmology is. So it gets pretty thick pretty quick. So I guess the straightest way to cut it is to bring it back to what I was talking about tonight. In many schools of Buddhism and in Hinduism and some other traditions, this idea of nirvana, and particularly in the West, the idea of nirvana becomes just a synonym for like heaven. You know, it's like we live in this crappy old world, and if we somehow gain enlightenment or get that thing, then we enter into nirvana, which is like just a synonym for heaven. But in the Zen school, it's not that easy because it relates to a mental state. And so what I was talking about tonight, samsara, the wheel of samsara is sort of the wheel of birth and death. And, you know, karma, the teaching of karma is related to this. And the way that we look at karma is sort of like good karma and bad karma, and whenever you see it on Facebook, ooh, bad karma, the idea is to accumulate as much good karma as you can. And I think a lot of people think, you know, maybe the way to nirvana is to accumulate as much good karma as you can, and to avoid as much bad karma, bad mojo. But it's incorrect, because the teaching of samsara is that it's a wheel. And so, you know, you develop, you know, you do good acts and they have good fruits, and so you have a positive rebirth and you get into a better situation and all this kind of stuff. And but then, as we all know, when we get to like Paris Hilton level of good birth and lots of resources, you can run into a lot of problems where you start to do things that are really negative, and then that sort of starts the whole sort of downward cycle of samsara. And that's why samsara is such a negative kind of thing, because it just goes around and around and around and around. You never get off. And that's what I was talking about tonight with, if we move it into sort of a psycho-emotional understanding of how we ourselves live, is that we're fixated to this idea of self. And no matter how good it gets, the better car we have and the better job we have and the better relationship we have, the more frightening it is for us, because we connect our satisfaction and happiness to having those things, which we, in our guts, we understand are transient. So I have this great job, but I'm always worried about losing it. I have all this money, but I'm always worried about the bottom falling out of the market and I'm losing it. I have this beautiful girlfriend, but it upsets me that everyone's always looking at her, because what if they make her a better offer? And even though she's beautiful, maybe there's something more beautiful. So, oh God, I can't even... So this is the way that we sort of live. We internally live in this world of samsara. Now, from the Buddhist perspective, the idea of samsara is not to just keep going around and around, not just keep cultivating positive activity, which is what karma means, is just action or activity, but for a reason, is that when we come to a balance in karmic activity, we have an opportunity to come into relationship with the Dharma, this teaching, the law. So whenever people talk about karma at the Zen Center, I always go, you're here, so let's stop talking about karma, because the whole perspective of cultivating karma in Buddhism is to come into contact with the Dharma, and then once you've done that, the idea is to get off the wheel, which is nirvana, extinction, blowing out. And so I think for most of us, we're always so fixated. So we go, I say, don't get attached to the idea of self. There's nothing in this cosmos that is fixed, lasting, permanent, or separate. And then they say, okay, then I'll go for awakening. This thing pops into existence called awakening, and they go after that. It just becomes like another car or another job or something. Or nirvana. There's something else that pops up, and we go after that. To understand nirvana from the Zen perspective is to understand what I was talking about tonight, which is this severing, or death, is the way that we talk about it in Zen. The death of the self, which is not that suddenly I have no personality or that I don't walk around in this world or make relationship, but that idea, the fixation, the stickiness of the self as something that is real. That as my physical environment and situations improve, that my net value improves. And as my physical situations and relationships diminish, my personal value diminishes. If we cut to the root, if we fundamentally come into the experiential realization of our nature, the activity of self doesn't disappear, but the life of it, I guess you could say, or the reality of it, the intensity of it goes out, is extinguished. And so in Zen, this is why we always are talking about that nirvana isn't something that's out there. It's present in this very moment. The mind of nirvana is that fundamental rest that knows that waves rise and waves fall, but the fundamental value of the ocean isn't born and it doesn't die. There is this birthlessness and deathlessness in each and every moment of our lives. And so if we want to talk about maintenance, there's nothing to maintain. It's happening all the time. That's the natural activity of the cosmos. For me, it means practice, because that's those waves, the self is such a sticky thing, and it's so easy for us to get caught up into gain and improvement and success and all those kinds of things. Or the flip, the opposite, it's so easy to get caught up in failure and depression and I'm no good. And I always find when I come to sit, to engage in this practice of Zazen, I talk about it as coming home or returning to the origin or meeting my original face. This is where we can enter the great mind of nirvana, return home to this fundamental perspective that, all things that are of the nature to be born are of the nature to die, but in this vast cosmos there is neither birth nor death. I don't know, does that make sense? Okay, that makes sense. So, yeah, that's the best I can do in a nutshell on nirvana. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.